Hi guys, welcome. Good afternoon. My name's Laura Jones and I'll be the MC for this session. Today we're here to talk about personal assistants as part of the next contextually aware runtime. And I have Mike Calcagno, who is partner director of engineering at Bing, and Marcus Ash, who's partner group program manager for Windows. Together, they are two of our leaders for Cortana. So how this is going to work is I'm going to ask a few questions that I already have, and then we'll be taking some questions from the audience. So please be thinking about what you might want to ask as we go through. So to get started, I'll just have you guys briefly introduce yourselves. Mike, do you want to give it a go?
Yeah, sure. I'm Mike Calcagno. As Laura said, I'm a director of engineering on the Bing team. I run the engineering team that's responsible for the Cortana service. The Cortana service is situated in the application and services group. I run that team. I have teams working with me all over the world. You know, one in Bellevue, one in China, a couple in China. Great teams in Israel. Some of them are here in the front row. Shout out to the teams from Israel. And yeah, that's I run the Cortana backend.
Yeah, and I'm Marcus Ash. I'm the group program manager for Cortana for the Windows team, but we'll talk about this later. Mike and I share responsibilities for defining the product, figuring out what devices we're going to put it on, what the experiences are. But my team mainly does program management for Windows, designing the user experience for that particular set of products, Windows and Windows Phone. Been at Microsoft almost 17 years, been on the Cortana team since the very early days. Mike and I almost started at the same time, way back in 2012 already.
Great, thanks guys. So both of you were here for the inception of Cortana. I'm wondering if you could tell me a bit about those early days and Microsoft's decision around creating their own personal digital assistant.
Do you want to take that one?
Sure,
I'll
yeah. Start.
Right, yeah, okay, you start.
So I joined the team in October of 2012, and at the time, we were thinking about the next version of Windows Phone, so we had just shipped Windows Phone 8, and the question was, what's next? And there was a team actually that had already thought about, well, the next thing could be a personal assistant, mainly coming from the perspective of, if you think about the future of search, we had a search product embedded in Windows Phone 7, Windows Phone 8. The most interesting applications to search in the future would be more proactive applications. So when I joined, there was already a baseline of work around, hey, if we were going to take search and make it more of a proactive experience for customers, we should personify it. Instead of thinking about it as search with features, we should think about it as an assistant that helps you search for things and also helps you do a bunch of other cool stuff. This guy, Robert Howard, on my team, way back early in 2012, had already created a name for it. He called it Cortana.
Codename.
Codename. Yeah, we should distinguish. But he had codenamed the product Cortana just because he knew internally at Microsoft, if he called it Cortana, people would understand, oh, that's that assistant that's in Halo, and since a bunch of us played Halo, it really stuck. So that was, in October, and then through the course of customer research and actually interviewing real personal assistants, we settled pretty quickly on the idea that there's something here that we should go and build. And then from January of roughly 2013 up until April of 2014, team was just pretty heads down trying to get it to work. But we started from a really good foundation because a bunch of people had already thought about bringing a personal assistant to Windows Phone before I joined in October of that 2012.
Yeah, I came on the project in just a couple months after Marcus in December 2012. I remember it was like Christmas Eve was one of the the big days where I went into the boss's office and we were talking about our group at the time was chartered with taking the assets we had in search and actually using those assets to make other products at Microsoft better, including Windows Phone. I mean, you can see a lot of that, here today now. It's like, the underpinnings of Bing and the kind of, machine learning capabilities, the search index that we have in Bing, that's now being applied across the company. Cortana was one of the first instances of that. And so, I started working with Marcus really early on. And, one thing that we always, I think we did well, and which, is kind of, again, coming through in the way the company's working now is Marcus and I have always operated as one team. He was in the Windows team, I was in the Bing team, but we decided from the start that we were going to plan together, we were going to work together. There wasn't going to be any like awkward team boundary where they got to decide this and we got to decide this other stuff. We just do the product together, right, as a single team. And yeah, we still work that way. And so it's actually really cool to see Marcus, like 2014 when we introduced Cortana on Windows Phone, Marcus and I were sitting together in the back row when Joe Belfiore was kind of like introducing it to everybody. I had just got a call in the morning at like 7 in the morning saying, hey, the service failed over to Chicago last night. Should we fail it back to Columbia for like, latency purposes? And I'm like, is it working? And they said, yeah, don't touch it, right? And, so our hearts were in our mouths in the back row there in 2014. Come such a long way, and to see Marcus up there on stage. I sat in the same seat. I was in the back, my lucky seat. I was in the back row, right? And but to see Marcus out there, kind of like sharing like what we want to do now. The Cortana's kind of got some momentum behind it. It was just really cool to see. Yeah. You did a good job with the demo too.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, great job.
It was an A demo, Marcus.
All right.
So speaking of, Satya shared his vision for the next paradigm of technology and talked about conversation as a platform and human interaction as the new UI. So would love to hear your perspective on how Cortana plays a role in that.
Yeah, I really think Cortana is like a great fit for conversation as a platform. I think it really came through. I think when you saw Lillian Rincon doing the demo in Skype, I think the interaction model, the way that Cortana can participate in conversations, the way that Cortana can kind of proactively insert itself into a conversation and give you more value, the way it brokers to maybe other conversational entities, that interaction model just feels really good to me, right? And the fact that we're working toward that, I just feel like we're really, on the right track. I think it's very consistent with what we wanted for Cortana all along. We always knew that a good assistant would connect you to experts, connect you to other services. We always knew that a good assistant would know you, and we always knew that a good assistant would be natural to interact with and kind of fun to interact with. The conversation as a platform kind of takes all those concepts and kind of, formalizes it and says, yeah, this is really what it's about. I think Cortana fits in really well.
Yeah, and just a couple points to add. I think there's a user experience point that we're trying to make around Cortana should go where you are. And it makes sense for Cortana to be in Outlook if you're trying to do something with scheduling, or to be in Skype if you're trying to do something with messaging, or to be in Microsoft Edge if you're trying to do something related to web browsing. So that's a principle that Mike and I thought about way back when. We start by trying to help people build a habit on top of something like search, but I think the dream was always that Cortana would be about you, and Cortana would modify and adapt based on what you're trying to get done. So that feels like a very natural progression for us. I think the other thing with conversations is chat-based conversations, clearly something that people are doing a lot, especially in a mobile context, but don't underestimate the power of email as a conversation medium, text messaging as a conversation medium, all the different things that we see people trying to do in those contexts, which we really tried to highlight in the demo. The idea that conversations as a platform certainly has a bunch of things we're going to do around Skype and the interface there, and bots that we talked about, but we also see a lot of value in email and texting and all these other different conversation mediums.
Great. So I know we're talking a lot about the future and your point of view on the personal assistant there, but talking about the present a little bit, I think personal assistants are becoming popular, but they're not quite mainstream. And I'm wondering what you guys think it will take to make it an integral part of a person's life and to get that habit going so that it is mainstream.
Yeah. So, I think, for anything like Cortana to become mainstream, we don't kid ourselves, right? The value that the assistant provides has to be indispensable, right? We really want to create, a situation where people will look back and say, remember when you had to write down the name of that toy store that you went to in San Francisco? Or, remember when you used to have to worry about how your schedule would come together on some particular day? We really want to provide indispensable value to the user such that they can't imagine that they lived without it before. I think in terms of, making the assistant as a category mainstream, I think we're still at the very early stage where we're still building user habits. I think user habits around interacting with an assistant haven't really been richly established. I think one thing that people have been doing less well than they could is what we're actually introducing, kind of now. A good assistant doesn't wait for you to come to him, right? And with needs. A good assistant kind of anticipates when you're going to be in trouble and gives you some solutions for solving it. So we've introduced this notion of proactive actions, right? That's exactly the pattern that we're trying to establish, which is we can look at what we know about you, we can look at how your day is going to go, we can anticipate that you may have a problem in one part of your day or another, and like a good assistant will then suggest some actions, right, that people can plug into and actually give the user assistance. We want the ecosystem, we want the apps and services now to be those actions, to be those experts, right? But then the assistant kind of plays the more traditional role of sussing out problems and inserting itself when it thinks it can be helpful.
Yeah, and I think it's early days. The thing that I get most excited about is when you look at major inflections in computing and how people use computers, dating back to the original mouse keyboard designs, touch, this feels similar to me. It's early, people are still trying to establish how it's going to work. I think the big shift in computing around, you have a bunch of devices and there's a bunch of stuff going on across these devices. What is the consistent interface that you design that's not so device dependent? How can you walk up to any device and just know how to use it naturally? That's what feels most exciting to me about Cortana. We clearly want to see momentum on the existing product, but I think we have to have an eye towards a future state where I'll walk up to that BMW and I'll know how to get information about my calendar or traffic or all these other different things. I'll be able to come into my house and turn on the TV and do all these different things that aren't as easy as they should be today. So I think that's one of the future states that we certainly imagine for Cortana. And the challenge with this is always, you start from something that people understand today, you try to build incremental habits on it, but you always want to keep in mind, well, what do we think people are going to do 5 or 10 years from now? And how do we make sure that we're always pushing state of the art and really pushing forward on this new vision of a device, an assistant that isn't tied to a device or platform, an assistant that's really built around you, a user experience that modifies itself based on how you think you're going to use anything that comes in front of you, I think is a really interesting challenge that we're still working through.
Well, it sounds like an exciting future. So we're at a developer conference. Let's start talking about proactive actions and how did we come up with that as a value add for both our developers and users?
Yeah. Do you want to take end user stuff?
Yeah, so I'll start with the end user perspective. Mike, there was a team that had actually worked on a similar concept a few years ago right here in Israel, where you could set an action based on a condition. When this happens, do something. And I think that was an interesting idea. And I think the perspective that Mike and the team brought forward was, if you have an assistant and you want that assistant to proactively do something, how do you make that easy for people to understand? And then the thing that I think is super powerful is once I've seen the assistant do that once, I can then say, okay, when this condition happens, do it automatically. So they coined the phrase contextual delegation, which I think is really spot on. Once I observe you doing something where you needed help, now I can remember that, so the next time it comes up, it's even easier for me to do it, to the point where maybe I just do it automatically for you.
Yeah, the idea is really based on, kind of how assistants actually learn. It's like, when you first get an assistant and you're building that relationship, they don't start immediately doing a bunch of stuff for you, and they don't start immediately with a big laundry list of everything that they can do. They kind of learn about you, they understand the patterns and the habits that you tend to have. When you're in this situation, this is what you do. Here's some things that you're doing repetitively. Every time you leave, you send a message to your spouse or whatever. And it's through that observation that eventually you can insert yourself and you can offer to add value. One of the, I give some internal talks now to people, and one thing that Marcus and I both really obsess over is it's fine to do. It's fine to apply technology to areas like search. And we at Microsoft, we tend to be really good at, if we can get something down to a machine learning problem, we end up really good at solving it. What we're sometimes missing, and what we've really tried to imbue Cortana with, is this idea that when we apply this intelligence, we want it to really be helpful, right? What is the essence of being helpful? right? And one of the things that we've identified is this thing that I used to call assistance patterns, right? And I used to give an example to the team, kind of making fun of the own team, saying like, look, I go to work at the same day at the same time every single day. 6:30 in the morning, I drive to work. I don't need traffic information on that day. The traffic is the same, right? It's the day I'm running late or the day that I'm off my routine, that's when I really need help. That's an assistance pattern. And the proactive actions are actually, it's almost a direct embodiment in Cortana of that idea that there are these assistance patterns that we're going to add over time, and then we're going to invite developers to plug in and kind of be the heroes or be the experts in those assistance patterns.
There's one other interesting thing that we've found is Cortana is a fairly complex product. You know, when you ask customers, do you use Cortana? Usually they'll say yes. You know, I find web results or I search for apps, I find settings. I'll use voice occasionally. But I think the interesting thing is we've heard this in a bunch of focus groups and we've even seen in feedback. I know it can do more, I'm just not sure all the things it can do. And I think this is where proactive actions will help. If you have a meeting that's in Cortana and we show you the types of things you can do with that meeting, and this is powered by developers, then the UI becomes a little bit more self-discoverable. You don't have to know the totality of Cortana to know all these different things you can do. We're really smart about putting the right things in front of you in context.
Great point.
And then discovering things, like the whole Glimpse example or the Just Eat example, I didn't even know you could do that. And I think when it's obvious to people to go, wow, like what other things can we go do? So I wouldn't, the thing I'm really excited about is don't underestimate just the discovery of all this feature work that we can do with these right contexts.
No, I think, one of the, for those of you who've come by and, we have a booth right over there and I think we have a session today at 5 o'clock. For those of you who come and kind of dig deeper, you'll notice that we have this construct called, obviously actions, right? But then we have defined actions. And defined actions we're putting a lot of work in behind the scenes to make sure that if you register your app or service for a defined action, you're going to get all sorts of support, right? And making sure that you can handle the contextual information that we have about users. You'll be able to, we'll give you support on if a user actually comes and tries to invoke your action, that support for understanding those intents will be kind of baked in automatically. So it's exactly as Marcus says. The first time you show a user that, hey, if you're running late for a meeting, we can send a glimpse. Users might not even know that was possible. But when then they can come back and say, hey, send a glimpse because I'm running late. If you've registered for a defined action, we'll handle that for you, right? And we're hoping that, as Marcus says, the discovery step will give us give everybody an extra lift, both Cortana and the ecosystem. So I need to use my hands. I'm Italian, right? I need to. Yeah. And the team makes fun of me for it. I'm looking at you. So.
Great. So I'll take a pause there on my questions and see if there's any questions from the audience. I think we have Paul here with the mic. If you guys have questions, don't be shy.
Ask a question.
Can you give us a little bit more of a, a concrete path to what it's going to be like to get on board this as developers? I mean, I can think of any one of 1,000 phrases I might want to utter to Cortana, and I just realize it doesn't know what to do with it, so it's like I want to write an app. Why? Because I feel like it in the moment.
I wasn't able to hear the question. Yeah. Paul, did you hear the question? Okay.
I think
Is that any better?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry. Can you give us a little bit more of a concrete idea of what it's going to be like to do this development process? I mean, I come up with app ideas all the time during my day. So let's suppose I've come up with something I want to say to Cortana, usually because I'm driving, and that's all I can do is speak. So I fire up Cortana, and I want it to do X.
Yeah.
Well, it doesn't do that right now, so I want to get home and write the app.
Yeah, I got you. Yeah. So I heard the question. So we've really tried to start with proactive actions, especially. We've tried to start from a place that makes things really easy to get started and get in. Let Cortana know very quickly about what you can do, and then as we advance toward this vision of conversations as a platform, or kind of richer contextual uses of information for the user. We want that basic stuff that you do now to kind of carry forward. So the very basic thing that we're asking everyone to do, the easiest thing to do, is that if you have an application that's actually organized in terms of deep link, right, that if you have a deep linkable application, it really is just a simple matter of going in, looking at the kind of context or the assistance patterns, the insights that we are going to tell you in advance that we're good at detecting, right? And then given the context information that's available from those insights, deep link it into your app. So when the user clicks on it, we'll launch the app and you'll land in the right page. If you look at the Just Eats example, they had a deep linkable app already. It took them about 15 minutes, right, to go wire into the meeting over lunch insight. And then they took, oh, okay, I can have the user location, I can have the user cuisine preferences, with their permission, of course. Here's how I would handle it on the other side. It comes over as part of the URL, right? They just parse the URL and they drop it into their app. So very easy to get started. The other alternative, it's like if you're not a defined action, we do have this notion of arbitrary action, right? I think, it's a little kind of a wonky term, right? But for any particular context, you can say, hey, here's something that I want to present to the user in this context. It's just an arbitrary action. There's no kind of like advanced support for it, but you can actually wire up that deep linking yourself, right, with an arbitrary action. The final thing I would say is, like I see, Rob Chambers, sitting out there. Rob is our speech extensibility, expert. The VCD story, actually making it easy for users to, with voice or text, just invoke your app and launch your app. You can still submit a VCD with your app to the store, right, and that will still work, right? So what we'd like you to do is, like, everybody should do a VCD, right? That's kind of what we announced a couple years ago. And then start to play in this connecting to experts ecosystem, right? Start with the insights that we have on the proactive canvas. We'll add more of them over time. And then if you go forward to kind of the conversation as a platform work, when you saw in the demo that Cortana was brokering to that Weston bot for reservations, it's that same teaching and that same deep linking that you've done. We're going to suck that information into the cloud and use that as the basis for brokering, right? So we're trying to get the ecosystem bootstrapped based on that pretty simple mechanics.
Hi, I work for the company that produces software for accountants, and the idea of personal assistance, sounds really good to us if it could be extended also into the professional day-to-day kind of task what accountants do. So how deep can we go in teaching Cortana to understand, tasks and workflow that accountants have? Is it just one action, or can we teach her like file taxes for my client, or check if if they have all the forms submitted ready for to prepare the taxes, stuff like that?
Yeah, no, directionally, I think we're both very well aligned, right? With we do want the actions and the delegation that you can eventually have your assistant do for you. We want it to be really rich, long-running things in the same way that your real assistant. I was just I'm buying a house and I'm trying to get homeowners insurance. It's a really old house. You got to call like 5,000 people, and they go check with the underwriter, and it's a task that actually lasts quite a long time. To get started with, we really just want to use apps and services as they are today, which are kind of single shot. We want to use those to get started with. But our vision is eventually we would like to have a web of actions, right, if you will, right, or a semantic web of actions that would eventually correspond to these longer running tasks, right, and invite developers in on that. Also on the roadmap, I would say we're not doing this now, right, but right now we're kind of in charge of the context, right? It's our profile and our knowledge of the user that's kind of powering the proactive interactions. We would love over time to actually bring in third parties on the context side too, where your app or service can actually tell Cortana something about the user, right? Cortana would say the equivalent of, that's a good idea, right? Surface that to the user and it would drive you right back to this long-running task powered by your service, right? And so that's our vision for, we chose the title pretty carefully. We do think this is a contextual OS, right? It's a user-centric, device-agnostic, context-driven OS, right, for getting things done, right? And we think the agent can kind of sit at the center of that, right? And so you need to be able to do these richer, long-running things if you want to realize that.
That's
Anything
great.
to,
Yeah.
nothing more to add.
Nothing more to add.
Right.
Yeah.
Mr. Main Stage Demo's out of material. So it's like he spent it all on the main stage demo. I was in the back row writing this stuff.
No, I think it is a super,
So
one thing we've thought a lot about is how much does Cortana do? Like, should Cortana be able to absorb a bunch of information and be an expert at accounting versus how much does Cortana know about someone else that's an expert and helps you link that up? And I think we like the latter model. The idea that Cortana is a broker, Cortana knows enough about your context to hand you off to the right experience or the right application or service that can help. And I think what we start with are simpler tasks, but we certainly want to graduate, like Mike said, to longer, more complex tasks. We're passing off even more context.
or like more specific tasks, like enterprise tasks, workplace productivity, right? You can imagine line of business applications kind of plugging into Cortana. I think it's a broad ecosystem that we envision. It goes back to the idea of like that early metaphor of a real digital assistant or a real executive assistant. It's really been very powerful in guiding our thinking. And I remember this exact design question, right? What does your assistant really know about flights? She has core expertise that she's really great at, which is mostly about you and your schedule, right? Getting you through the day. My admin is just a master at knowing where I need to be, right? But, the ability to hook you up to a real expert as opposed to just be, we're kind of a mail app and we're kind of a flight app and we're kind of an expense reporting app. That's kind of it's a weak experience for the user. It's much better to kind of hand off, right? In the case where the handoff makes sense. And, that comes exactly from that metaphor of a real assistant.
I think we have another question.
You mentioned that you're expecting, or your vision is for Cortana to be device agnostic.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if that is caveated by being a Windows device agnostic. And I ask because I've played with Cortana on iPhone, and it's definitely more limited than what it is on Windows Phone. And I think the dream would be for me to have any kind of device, and Cortana would just be helping me everywhere I go. But I'm assuming that there are platform limitations that will prevent it from having the full glory of its power on a non-Windows device, which is more closed.
Yeah, we do think the experience with the assistant will be richest on Windows, right? That there is an advantage you have for deeply integrating with the device, right? We've seen already that there's certain inferences and learning that we can do about the user that's just better if you're deeply integrated with the device. That being said, we are serious about all devices. We've released Cortana on Android. We've released Cortana on iOS. We work with the limitations of those devices and operating systems and what we have access to. But the idea that your assistant should be, where you want to access it, that's very central to our thinking. And I think Microsoft, we're realistic that if you really do want an ambient presence, we were talking to some folks earlier today, and we were talking about home automation, and it's kind of wonky that to kind of interact with home automation now, you got to pull your smartphone out and, unlock it and open up the app, and you're competing with a light switch, right? I mean, it's pretty easy to flip that switch, right? And you're fumbling with your password and everything. And so, in an environment where natural interaction and conversational interaction controls all the devices in your life, I think it's unrealistic to expect all those devices to be Microsoft devices, right? I think there's a great angle for device makers who want to build really amazing devices with this capability in it to go work with Windows on that, right? And Windows IoT, for instance. But, we really are taking a inclusive approach to making the Cortana service available wherever the user might want it, regardless of platform.
Yeah, I think Mike's right. So our natural state will be, for Windows devices, that's where we're going to do our best work. That's where we're going to be able to design an experience. That's where we're going to have access to entry points and all kinds of other things. But we spend a lot of time thinking about the harder problem, which is on these other devices, how do you create a good connected experience? How do we make sure that when you do something on Windows, it's reflected in these other devices and vice versa? We think that that's a really big, important thing for us to get right, and it sets us apart. I think our strategy for a personal assistant is centered around you, and the things that you want to do across these devices. We want Windows to be a big part of that, and we want that experience to be great. But we also have to be cognizant of the fact that if I have a Windows PC, I'm very likely to have an Android or an iOS phone, and those experiences need to work really well together. So a lot of our work is around.
We had I was really kind of impressed with the company's approach to kind of the question on whether or not to bring Cortana and Android and iOS. We really made a very user-centric, decision about that, right? And we really were faithful to the vision of what we wanted to do for users. It's really simple when you step away from it and you say, do you really want an assistant that can't reach you on your phone, right? And the answer is obviously not, right? And so putting a piece of platform strategy or some worldview about what the device operating system landscape might be in 1 year or 5 years, we really don't want to get that in the way of the user and the experience, right? And so we've really, very consistent with the company strategy, we've delivered a cloud-driven experience, right? It's best on Windows, right? And it's meant to work across devices, regardless of what operating system those devices run.
And proactive actions, those will be cross-device as well?
Yeah, so we're starting out, the proactive actions are, they're supported today, if you join the developer preview, we'll work with Windows apps, we'll work with websites, we'll work with applications on Android. Applications on iOS, it's coming soon, right? So it's not available today, but it will come. And then as we move into the conversation as a platform landscape, you can just think about the same action invocation that we're counting on Cortana to do. We really want that to execute on a device or in a service that's appropriate for the user's context, regardless of what that would be. And so, yeah, we'll start with what we know, right? We'll try to learn based on what we know, and we'll expand from there.
Other questions from the audience? No?
All right, you guys
Can
have
I
been
give
great.
them more softballs?
Oh, yeah, softball. Do you want a softball? Do we have time? Do you have time for a few more softballs?
We do have time.
Oh, okay.
So what's your favorite Cortana feature right now, and what are you most looking forward to in the anniversary update?
You go for it.
My favorite feature is cross-device notifications.
Oh, okay.
So we're building this experience where notifications on your Android or Windows phone, still trying to figure out iOS, but Android, Windows phone will get forwarded to my PC. So I'm sitting in front of my PC and I get a text message, gets delivered, I can respond right there, and that automatically is taken care of. Missed calls, and I find that I use that quite a bit. My phone's ringing behind me, and now I don't have that. I don't have to look around. I know who's calling, and I can choose to quickly text them back. I think that's going to change the way that people think about these cross-device scenarios. It's a super concrete example. Your phone is somewhere, but you're sitting in front of a different device. Why can't I just handle that? And the fact that we're trying to approach it from a device-agnostic, platform-agnostic way, doesn't matter that you have an Android phone or a Windows phone, it still works with your Windows PC, we think is unique, and I think it's going to have a lot of value. It's the one feature in the Insider preview that people naturally discovered and started sending us mail about it. We did a missed call feature back in our November update, and we were surprised at how many people said, wow, this is pretty cool that this just shows up on my phone. A few weeks ago, people noticed that they were starting to get battery notifications. Your phone battery's running low on your PC, telling you you're less than 10%, you should probably plug it in. So we think we're on to something there. It's going to be really cool.
Yeah. My favorite feature is actually, it's one that we rolled out earlier, I guess late last year. It's the commitments feature. So with your permission, Cortana will actually look through the mail that you're sending, and when you promise to do something for someone, she'll actually put it back on the proactive canvas and say, hey, and that feature saves my bacon time and time again. And it doesn't matter who I'm writing to. You could write to Satya, you could write to Derek. I promise stuff all the time, and I just don't do it, right? And it, and amazingly, I'm still working here, right? And, it comes up on my canvas, said hey, it said you were going to send that slide deck, right? I'm like, oh yeah, I did say I'd send that, or I'll introduce you to this person, right? It's it'll take these kind of those commitments that you're making in your own communications, pull them out in a way that's present it to you when you have actually time to deal with it. It's just saved my bacon so many times. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Anything else, guys?
Can we get a microphone down here? Oh.
You can. Oh, wow. Someone turn that up. Okay, you mentioned home automation earlier. One of the really cool devices around at the minute is Amazon Echo. And obviously, you guys are you've got the Xbox and you kind of got the Kinect thing, but the Kinect is kind of disappearing, and you've got nothing in the lounge or in your house where you walk in your house and you go, turn on my lights. You mentioned about competing with a light switch. It's almost, the Amazon Echo is a perfect device for that context. Have Microsoft got any sort of thoughts or desires for that sort of product?
Marcus?
You want to go or?
Yeah, so I think there's
Laura.
a few things. It's a great question. The first thing that we come back to is we just remind people we're building a personal assistant that has a very specific context to us, because I think people will say voice assistant and not think about personal assistant. Voice assistant, tell the thing to do something, it responds. Personal assistant, your calendar, your schedule, all the information we know about you, in addition to a voice assistant. So I think that's one of the things that we're pretty grounded in. Then the next thing that we think about is the future of these devices, and the idea that voice should be a complementary part, we think, to a lot of the different devices you interact with. We start with Windows, and we start with PC, and we start with phones, but we also think that's a spectrum. There are going to be screens, there are going to be ways that you interact with voice, and there are going to be no screens. Phone via Bluetooth connection is one of the canonical examples we talk about all the time in the car, so we're making good, steady progress there. The first thing that Microsoft will show that's really a device in the home meant for communal scenarios, we're going to plug in a bunch of interesting work, is going to be the Xbox. And I think we're going to learn a ton from that. The actual Echo itself, and kind of thinking through devices and what Microsoft might do there, we don't have anything to announce. But I would say we are designing Cortana as a service with this future perspective of it's going to be running across a lot of different device instantiations. Everything from small speaker, no screen, all the way up to large conference room style devices where I can interact. And we are architecting in the product in a way where we can support those scenarios.
Yeah, no, I think the Echo is a great device, right? And I think it's like, going back to what Marcus was saying about device classes, like things that are interesting to us, it's always on, it's always connected, right? And it's displayless. An always on, always connected, displayless device, and again, nothing to announce. It's an interesting scenario, right? And it's the utility of that kind of device in home spaces. I think Echo's caught everybody's attention, and Amazon's done a really good job with it, right? So, it's caught our attention too, right? And we're certainly architecting Cortana in a way such that it will be able to add value on devices of that type, right? In addition to a big, much broader class. And then, what he said about the personal assistant, it's like, I think Alexa, it's closer to a voice assistant at this point, right? It's a microphone API, right? And it's we want that, right? And we think it's a great way of interacting with services, but we also want to make sure that when you're interacting with Cortana, it's recognizable to you as your assistant. It knows you, it knows your service preferences, right? It knows to give you an alert at the right place in the right time. And so making sure that personalization payload kind of comes with it, we're gonna, we'll make sure we do that right.
Yeah, I think one other point, and this has been a good learning for us, is just how much friction you have to remove from any voice interface. Like the minute you walk up to a device, you're like, oh, hold on a second, swipe up the screen. Oh, hold on a second, you lose people. So I think one thing you've seen us do with this anniversary update is the simple act of I have my tablet on the countertop and I just want to walk up to it and say, hey, Cortana, how many cups in a quart? Or hey, Cortana, how long is it going to take me to get to work? It has to be that fast.
Yeah.
And I think you're going to see that in the current products we have.
Just being self-critical, we've come a long way. It's like in the first version of Cortana, tell me a joke. It's like, I'm going to need your MSA, right? Like, you log in with your Microsoft account and, it goes up to the service and the joke cards are actually looking through and then we send the joke card. It was like, there was a lot of friction in that experience. One thing the Echo does really well, it's like, you give it a voice command, the voice command executes, not a lot of friction. Definitely something to learn from.
So you talk about that friction, as you were just saying, and talk about having Cortana available on different devices and different classes, but probably being a best on Windows idea, which I'm all for. How does that? I don't know how to put this. I guess is the Windows Phone 10 experience has been kind of disastrous as far as Cortana goes. So I'm curious how that lines up with we're trying to make it best on Windows. Cortana worked fantastic for me on my Windows Phone 8 device, or 8.1, whatever. I go and buy a Windows 10 device and nothing worked anymore. And even 6 months later now, after release of it, it still doesn't work the way that the old device used to. Like from processing a text message, basic things before we even get into all these ideas of where we want to go with it. It seems like huge steps were taken backwards. So I'm curious how that is being reconciled, I guess, with the. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I would say, one, we should definitely talk to you. You're surrounded by Rob Chambers and some other people there, which is a good thing. Specific feedback like that's certainly helpful, because customers that were with us on Windows Phone 8 and used Cortana and got to Windows Phone 10 and say, hey, it's not as great. We want to hear that feedback. If there are bugs or issues, we want to know. We want to fix them. I think what we're also finding is, because of a lot of the refactoring we did in Windows Phone 10 to really support this universal app platform, we re-architected Cortana to do the same thing. We started with a Windows Phone 8 product that was specific to phone. Then we had to look at, okay, how do we build a Windows product that scales across lots of platforms? And we might just be hitting some issues that you're encountering on that transition. They shouldn't be as severe as you're saying. So I think we want to get together and actually spend some time with you after this and just figure that out. And the other thing I would say there is the Insider program and having customers that give us that kind of feedback. We listen, we hear it, we try to improve the product as rapidly as possible. But the goal is certainly for Windows. Every version of Windows should get better for our customers that were with us on the previous version. If we're not hitting that bar for you, we want to know.
I think the feedback indicates that there's some quality work that's still left to do, right, in this move to Windows, the kind of Windows 10 era, right? And we take it really seriously. We're doing work in the service, just to make sure that the answers that you get from Cortana are the best we have. It's not always the case now. You'll find you get a better answer on Bing, which is just, not really excusable, because Bing and Cortana work so closely together, right? And, definitely some quality work still left to do on Windows 10, which the team is taking really seriously. In terms of the overall thing, we really want Cortana to be we want people to be proud to have Cortana. We want it to people to show their friends and say, look at this cool thing. The framework that we think we need in order to make that happen is that, we should just blow people away on first impression, right? Your first experience with Cortana should be easy and awesome. There's been a lot of friction with settings and, account and opt-in and stuff. It hasn't always been that. So we've been focusing on that a little bit. We want it to really be competitive with all the other assistants out there. That is, we should essentially do what they do and do it well. It's like they answer questions, we answer questions. They do sports, we do sports. And then, the thing that really, would kind of be the icing on the cake is we want to differentiate, right? And, the area where we really want to differentiate is in this area of the company's differentiation, which is really individual productivity, right? So it's not that we're just working on differentiation, right? We got the basics, we got the first impression, we got the friction, we have the quality work, we have meriting continued use, we have being competitive with what all the other assistants do, and then we'd like to differentiate too. Microsoft is serious about this, and we're invested well enough that we think we can do all those things. The balance of quality versus the differentiation, though, yeah, we hear your feedback, especially coming from Windows. Windows 8.1, Windows Phone 8.1, in retrospect, seemed hard at the time. Pretty easy project, right? Kind of one operating system, just dedicated, everything kind of right there in front of us. You look at the Windows ecosystem now, it's pretty broad and pretty vast, right? And a lot of engineering work just getting back to the level of quality that we want. There's still some of that work to do, and we hear that. So yeah, no, thanks for that feedback. It's good.
Great. I think we have time
We have
for
one up
more
here. This guy's been
question.
dying to ask a question. Like 5 times. It better be a good question now. I went out on a limb for this question. So.
Okay, here is my question. Can Cortana keep track of the time that you spend on certain tasks? Like for lawyers and accountants, it's very common that they want to keep track. Like I'm working on, Mr. Smith's return, and then I switch to Mrs. Jones, and then at the end of the day, I want to know how much time I spend on this and that. For practical use, you may want to keep track of how much you exercise or something. Can you do this?
No, that's a great suggestion. It's like, I mean, it's certainly like I had a manager early days of Microsoft. It's just code, right? It's like Cortana can do anything. Cortana doesn't do that now, but it's a great suggestion. We'll capture that. It's funny, like the other thing that Marcus and I were joking about is, one thing in the main stage demo or the keynote demo that you saw, another one of my favorite features is, hey Cortana, above lock, shut down my PC. When Cortana first shipped, didn't do that, because our, kind of brilliant PhDs on the team didn't think of it, right? But, the nice thing about Cortana is, we really do look at usage, right? We look what users are trying to do with Cortana, and because it's a cloud-driven experience, we can add a lot of these capabilities over time, right? One of the things Cortana didn't do at the beginning was, what time is it? We're like, why should Cortana have to tell you what time it is? Your smartphone has a clock. No one's going to ask that. One of our top queries in the very, very early days of Cortana was, Cortana, what time is it? Right? So we added it, right? So yeah, she doesn't do that now, the time tracking and stuff, but it's a great suggestion. We'll take that. Yeah.
Great. So maybe one more question from the gentleman over here.
So you mentioned notifications getting forwarded across devices. Does Cortana have an awareness of presence, or is it just going to get broadcast all across all my devices? Like, if I get a phone call when I'm at work, is it going to wake up my dog by my Xbox ringing, or how's that going to work?
Yeah, so the question was, when we talk about the multi-device experience, does Cortana have a notion of presence, right? Which device you're active on, She has an emerging notion of presence, right? We're working in the service on, a couple related concepts like an interruption service. We do have a device registration service, so we know what devices you have with Cortana, which one is active, which one is not. It's not as sophisticated as I would want, right? And so, I think it's a really natural place for Cortana to go be intelligent, to try to filter the noise, right? And kind of manage the notifications on your device. It's something that we're building toward, right? And I'm really excited about it. But yeah, I would say she has early notions of those concepts baked into her now, and we're not taking as much advantage as we could. So.
Well, and I think Phil talked about Cortana on Xbox will have gaming type of scenarios as well. So I think that's something you guys are thinking about too.
Yeah. Cool.
Great. Well, I think we're at time then. Thank you guys.
Everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Good
you.
to see you.